The afternoon sun hung low over Red Hollow, painting the dusty streets in shades of amber and rust. Annabeth Whitlow pressed her face against the train window, watching the desolate landscape roll past. Endless stretches of scrubland dotted with cacti and the occasional weathered fence post. The locomotive's whistle pierced the air, announcing their arrival at yet another frontier town that looked much like the last three they'd passed through. She clutched the worn leather handle of her valise tighter, feeling the weight of everything she owned in that single bag. Inside, carefully wrapped in brown paper, lay her mother's Bible, 2 clean dresses, a silver hairbrush that had seen better days, and, most importantly, the letter that had brought her here. The paper had grown soft from her constant handling over the past month, memorizing every word Samuel Hargrove had written in his precise, businesslike script. Miss Whitlow, I am a man of considerable means seeking a respectable woman of good character to manage my household and provide companionship in this lonely territory. I can offer security, comfort, and a proper home. I ask only for loyalty and the gentle nature befitting a wife. The train shuddered to a stop with a great hiss of steam. Annabeth smoothed her traveling dress, a faded blue cotton that had been mended twice at the hem, and gathered her courage. Through the window, she could see the platform, a simple wooden structure bleached pale by the relentless sun, with a sign that read Red Hollow in peeling black letters. She had expected Samuel to be waiting. In his letters, he'd seemed punctual, proper, the sort of man who would arrive early rather than risk being late. But as she descended the metal steps, her worn boots touching the platform, she saw no one who matched his description. No tall gentleman in a dark suit. No carriage bearing the Hargrove Ranch brand he'd mentioned. The platform emptied quickly. Fellow passengers dispersed like tumbleweeds, leaving her standing alone with her valise, the late afternoon heat pressing down on her shoulders. A mangy dog investigated her skirts briefly before losing interest. The station master, a grizzled man missing most of his teeth, barely glanced up from his newspaper. "Excuse me," she ventured, approaching his window. "I'm looking for Mr. Samuel Hargrove. He was supposed to—" "Hargrove Place is 8 miles out," the man interrupted, not looking up. "Road's that way." He gestured vaguely westward with a tobacco-stained finger. 8 miles. In this heat, with the night approaching, Annabeth felt the first flutter of panic in her chest. She had 17 cents to her name, having spent her last dollar on food during the journey. Not enough for lodging. Certainly not enough to hire transportation. Is there perhaps a message, or someone coming? The station master finally looked at her, taking in her Eastern clothes, her pale skin already pinking from the sun, the desperate hope in her eyes. He shrugged. "Lady, I just work the station." She retreated to a bench under the platform's meager shade, trying to think. The town beyond the station looked rough. Saloons and gambling houses outnumbered any respectable establishments. Not the sort of place a woman alone should wander after dark. That's when she saw him. He emerged from the livery stable across the dusty street, leading a bay mare by the reins, tall and lean. He moved with the easy grace of a man accustomed to physical work. His clothes were simple, worn denim trousers, a cotton shirt rolled to the elbows, leather boots that had seen countless miles, but it was his face that made her breath catch. Angular features weathered by sun and wind, dark hair that fell past his collar, and eyes so deep brown they appeared black in the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. He glanced her way, and their eyes met for a heartbeat. Something passed between them in that moment, not recognition, for they were strangers, but something else, an awareness, a pull. He looked away first, focusing on adjusting the mare's saddle. But Annabeth noticed how his hands stilled for a moment, how he glanced back at her from under the brim of his hat. Desperation made her bold. She rose from the bench, gripping her valise, and crossed the street. Dust swirled around her skirts with each step. "Pardon me," she called out when she was close enough. He turned fully then, and she could see his face clearly. A thin scar ran through his left eyebrow, and his jaw was rough with a day's growth of beard. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured. "Ma'am, I'm looking for the Hargrove Ranch. I was told it's 8 miles from here." His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "You're the bride." It wasn't a question. Heat flooded her cheeks, though whether from embarrassment or the way he said the word bride, like it left a bitter taste. She couldn't say, "Miss Annabeth Whitlow," she said, lifting her chin. "And you are?" "Jesse Kane." He didn't offer his hand, which was probably proper, though nothing about this felt proper. "I work the stables here in town. Sometimes do work for Hargrove." "Oh." Relief washed over her. "Then perhaps you could—" "He didn't come for you." It was a statement, flat and unsurprised. There must be some mistake. He knew which train. "No mistake." Jesse turned back to the mare, checking the cinch. "Samuel Hargrove doesn't make mistakes. He makes choices." The word stung, though she wasn't sure why. "Then I'll need to hire someone to take me. Do you know—" "Won't find anyone willing this late. Storm's coming." She looked at the sky, which seemed clear enough save for some clouds building on the horizon. "I have to get there tonight. He's expecting me." Jesse was quiet for a long moment, his hands gentle on the mare's neck. "Finally," he sighed. "I've got to head that direction anyway. Can take you far as Miller's Creek. It's 5 miles from Hargrove's place, but closer than here." "I would be grateful," she said quickly, before he could change his mind. "I can pay—" "Keep your money." His eyes met hers again, and that strange pull returned, stronger than before. "Wait here." He disappeared into the stable and returned leading a sturdy-looking wagon hitched to 2 horses. Without ceremony, he took her valise and placed it in the back, then offered his hand to help her up. His palm was calloused and warm, and she felt the contact like a brand even through her thin gloves. They rode in silence through the town, past the saloons where piano music already spilled into the street, past the general store with its faded awning, past the church with its crooked steeple. Jesse handled the reins with an easy competence, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. "You came far," he said finally. Not quite a question. "Philadelphia. Long way to travel for a man you've never met." She bristled at the judgment in his tone. "Mr. Hargrove and I have corresponded extensively. He's a gentleman of good standing." "I know what he is." The hardness in his voice made her stomach tighten. "If you have something to say, not my place." He glanced at her, and his expression softened slightly. "Just, the frontier isn't kind to gentle things. Miss Whitlow makes them hard or breaks them. I'm stronger than I look." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I believe you might be—" They'd been riding for perhaps an hour when the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and something else. Dust. Lots of it. Jesse's posture changed, tension running through his shoulders. "Storm's moving faster than I thought," he muttered, urging the horses to a quicker pace, but it was too late. The dust wall hit them like a living thing, turning day to twilight in seconds. The horses whinnied in protest, and Annabeth could barely see Jesse's shape beside her, though he sat just inches away. Grit filled her mouth, nose, eyes. She pulled her shawl over her face, but it barely helped. Jesse's hand found her arm, gripping firmly. "Hold on," he shouted over the wind. She could barely hear him. Through the swirling dust, she saw him fighting to control the horses, which were growing more panicked by the second. Then, through the chaos, a structure loomed, a barn or stable. She couldn't tell. Jesse turned the wagon sharply, and they plunged through an open doorway into blessed stillness. The contrast was so sudden she gasped. Outside, the storm raged, but inside was quiet save for their harsh breathing and the horses' nervous stamps. "You hurt?" Jesse asked, his hands running over the horses, calming them with practiced touches and low murmurs. "No, I'm fine." She wasn't, not really. Her hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in dusty strands around her face. Her dress was covered in grit, but she was unharmed. Jesse lit a lantern hanging from a beam. Casting warm light through what she could now see was indeed a stable, but not just any stable. It was well maintained, with fresh hay in the stalls and tools hung neatly on the walls. "This yours?" she asked. "I stay here sometimes, when I'm not at the town stables." He was already unhitching the horses, leading them to empty stalls. "We'll have to wait it out. These storms can last hours." Hours. Alone with a stranger in a stable, if anyone found out. But what choice did she have? Mr. Hargrove will worry." Jessie gave her a look she couldn't interpret. "Samuel Hargrove hasn't worried about anyone but himself in all the years I've known him." She wanted to defend her intended, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she watched Jessie work, noting the careful way he tended the horses, the gentle strength in his movements. When he was finished, he grabbed a blanket from a trunk and shook it out. "Here, you're shivering." She hadn't realized she was. The desert heat had fled with the sun, leaving a chill that seeped through her thin dress. She accepted the blanket gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. It smelled of leather and hay and something else. Him, she realized with a flush. Jessie built a small fire in a metal barrel near the door, carefully positioned to let smoke escape. The warmth was welcome, and she found herself drawn to it, settling on a hay bale nearby. He sat across from her, the fire casting shadows that made his dark eyes even darker. "Thank you," she said softly, "for bringing me this far, for giving us shelter. Couldn't leave you at the station." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Wouldn't be right. Still, not many men would have bothered." "I'm not many men." The way he said it, quiet and sure, made something flutter in her chest. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside. Finally, she couldn't stand the questions burning inside her any longer. "You don't like Mr. Hargrove?" Jessie's jaw tightened. "What I like or don't like doesn't matter." "It does to me." The words surprised her, but they were true. "If I'm to marry him, then you'll marry him." Jessie's voice was flat. "Women like you always do what they're supposed to do." "Women like me?" Indignation flared. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you came 2,000 miles to marry a man whose face you've never seen. Know you're wearing a dress that's been mended with threads that don't quite match. Know you've got more pride than money and more hope than sense." Each observation hit like a physical blow because they were all true. "And what's wrong with hope?" "Nothing." His voice gentled. "Just hate to see it wasted." "On Mr. Hargrove?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "You ever wonder why a man with his money needs to send away for a bride? Why no woman in 3 counties will have him?" The flutter in her chest became a stone. "Perhaps they don't appreciate. He had a wife before, a local girl, pretty thing, full of laughter." Jessie's voice was carefully neutral, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the stick. "She lasted 2 years. Official story was she died of fever." "And the unofficial story?" Jessie looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Pain, old and deep. "There isn't one. Not that anyone will speak aloud." He stood abruptly, moving to check on the horses. "Forget I said anything. It's not my place." But she couldn't forget. The seed of doubt was planted now, taking root. She watched him with the horses, the gentle way he spoke to them, the care in his hands. This was a good man, she thought, a man who noticed mended dresses in hopes that might be misplaced, a man who'd given her shelter without being asked. "Why do you stay?" she asked. "If you dislike him so much?" Jessie's hand stilled on the mare's neck. "Everyone's got their reasons for being where they are. Their debts to pay." "What's your debt?" He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her heart race. "That's a dangerous question." "Miss Whitlow." "Annabeth," she said softly. "Just Annabeth." Annabeth. The way he said her name, low and careful, like he was tasting it. Some stories aren't meant for telling, especially not to women about to marry Samuel Hargrove. She stood then, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "I'm not his wife yet." "No," he agreed. his eyes never leaving hers. "You're not." The air between them crackled with something electric, more dangerous than the storm outside. She should step back. She knew, should remember why she was here, what she'd promised in her letters. But Jesse Kane stood before her with his scarred eyebrow and gentle hands and eyes that saw too much. And she couldn't seem to remember why Samuel Hargrove had seemed like salvation. "The storm's passing," Jesse said finally, though neither of them looked toward the door. "Is it?" He moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell the leather and smoke that clung to him. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of her dust-covered hair behind her ear. "This is a mistake," he said roughly. "Yes," she agreed. Neither of them moved away. The Hargrove house rose from the desert like a monument to loneliness. 3 stories of imported limestone and glass. It seemed to mock the humble adobe structures that dotted the landscape for miles around. Annabeth sat rigidly in the carriage Samuel had finally sent, a full day after her arrival in Red Hollow, and tried to reconcile this cold mansion with the warm home she'd imagined from his letters. Jesse had left her at Miller's Creek as promised, just as dawn was breaking. They'd spent the night in careful distance after that moment by the fire. Speaking of safe things, the weather, the horses, anything but the charge that hummed between them. When he'd helped her from the wagon, his hands had lingered a heartbeat too long at her waist, and she'd seen her own confusion mirrored in his eyes. "Be careful," was all he'd said before driving away, leaving her to wait for Samuel's man in the early morning chill. Now, as the carriage rolled through iron gates topped with sharp finials, she touched the spot where Jesse's hands had been and tried to forget the warmth of them. Samuel Hargrove stood on the wide porch, hands clasped behind his back. He was exactly as described in his letters. Tall, well-dressed, with silver threading through his dark hair. Handsome, in a cold, carved way. But his eyes, pale blue and unblinking, made her think of winter mornings in Philadelphia when the ice was too thick to break. "Miss Whitlow." He descended the steps with measured precision. "I trust your journey was not too taxing." "Mr. Hargrove." She accepted his hand to help her down, noting how different it felt from Jesse's. Soft, cool, possessive. The train ride was quite manageable. "And yet you arrived a day late." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I was concerned when you weren't on yesterday's afternoon train." "I was on yesterday's train? Sir—" "As I wrote in my last letter." "Ah." He waved a dismissive hand. "A miscommunication with my man, no doubt. These frontier types are notoriously unreliable." She thought of Jesse, of his steady hands and careful attention to the horses, and bit back a defense. "Of course. Well, you're here now." Samuel's gaze traveled over her, cataloging like a man examining livestock. She saw him note the dust still clinging to her hem, the wisps of hair that had escaped her hastily repaired chignon. "Mrs. Corbett will show you to your room. You'll want to refresh yourself before dinner." Mrs. Corbett proved to be a severe woman in black bombazine, with iron-gray hair pulled so tight it stretched her features. She led Annabeth through the house in silence, their footsteps echoing on polished floors. Everything was expensive and cold, crystal chandeliers that threw rainbow fragments across bare walls, furniture that looked like it had never been sat upon, windows draped in heavy velvet that blocked out most of the light. "Your room, Mrs." Corbett announced, opening a door on the second floor. The chamber was large and well-appointed, with a 4-poster bed and matching wardrobe. But like everything else, it felt like a museum display. No personal touches, no warmth. Even the flowers in the vase were silk. "Mr. Hargrove takes dinner at 7 sharp. Mrs." Corbett informed her. "He expects punctuality. Your trunk arrived this morning. I've taken the liberty of unpacking. Your limited wardrobe has been arranged in the armoire." The emphasis on limited was unmistakable. Annabeth lifted her chin. "Thank you. Mr. Hargrove has also taken the liberty of ordering new clothing from San Francisco. They should arrive within the month. Until then." Her gaze swept over Annabeth's travel-worn dress with clear disapproval. When she was alone, Annabeth sank onto the bed. It was as hard as it looked, and tried to calm her racing thoughts. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? Security, respectability, a new life far from the pitying looks and whispered gossip of Philadelphia. So what if the house felt like a tomb? So what if Samuel's eyes reminded her of a snake's? She thought, unbidden, of a stable that smelled of hay and leather, of dark eyes that saw too much, of a rough voice saying her name like a prayer. No. She'd made her choice the moment she'd answered Samuel's advertisement. Jesse Kane was a dangerous distraction. Nothing more. Dinner was an ordeal of crystal and china, and silence, broken only by the clink of silverware. Samuel sat at the head of the long table, she at his right hand, with enough space between them to fit another person. He ate methodically, cutting his meat into precise squares, chewing exactly 15 times before swallowing. She counted. "Tell me about your family," he said finally, though his tone suggested he didn't much care about the answer. "My parents are both deceased. I was raised by my mother's cousin in Philadelphia after... No siblings." "No, sir." "Good. Fewer complications." He took a sip of wine. "I trust you understand what I expect from this arrangement?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "You were quite clear in your letters. A companion, someone to manage the household, and to provide heirs, naturally." He said it as casually as discussing the weather. "I'm 43. Miss Whitlow, I require sons to carry on the Hargrove name and inherit my enterprises." "Of course." The words felt like dust in her mouth. "Excellent. We'll be married at the end of the week. I've already arranged things with Reverend Michaels. A small ceremony. I see no need for excessive display. A week. She'd be Mrs. Samuel Hargrove in a week." The food turned to ash on her tongue. "Is that agreeable to you?" He was watching her now, those pale eyes sharp. "Yes. Whatever you think best." "Indeed." He returned to his meal. "You may write to your cousin to inform her of the wedding. Of course, I'll review the letter before it's posted." "Review it?" "I prefer to be aware of all correspondence leaving my house. Surely you understand. A man in my position must be careful." She thought of Jesse's warning about gentle things in the frontier, how they turned hard or broke. Of course. The days that followed blurred together in a routine that felt more like captivity than courtship. Breakfast at 7, always alone as Samuel left early to oversee his various business interests. Morning spent with Mrs. Corbett learning the house's elaborate and unnecessary systems, which china for which occasions, how Samuel preferred his shirts arranged, the precise temperature of his bath water. Afternoons were for accomplishments, embroidery in the stuffy parlor, playing the out-of-tune piano that no one ever listened to, writing letters that Samuel read with a critical eye before allowing them to be sent. He edited them, too, striking out phrases he deemed too familiar or inappropriately emotional. Evenings were the worst. Dinner with Samuel, who interrogated her about her day's activities and found fault with most of them. Then, sitting in the parlor while he read business papers and she pretended to enjoy whatever improving book he'd selected for her. "You're too animated when you speak," he told her one evening. "A lady should be serene, controlled. You hold your teacup incorrectly. Like this, not like that. That laugh is too loud. Moderate yourself." Each criticism was delivered calmly, reasonably, like he was training a horse. And perhaps he was, she thought bitterly. Breaking her in, wearing down her spirit until she became the perfect, docile wife he required. She saw Jesse only once that week, at church on Sunday. He sat in the back with the other working men, his dark head bowed. When their eyes met across the sanctuary, something passed between them. A recognition. A regret. She looked away first, focusing on Samuel's profile as he sang hymns in his toneless voice. After the service, as Samuel spoke with the banker about interest rates, she found herself near the churchyard gate where Jesse was helping an elderly woman into her wagon. "Miss Whitlow," he said quietly, tipping his hat. Mr. Kane. She glanced back at Samuel, still deep in conversation. How are the horses? A ghost of a smile. Well enough. That mare you met? She's taken to refusing her oats unless they're mixed with molasses. Temperamental creature. Aren't we all? His eyes searched hers. You look tired. She wanted to laugh. Or cry. Tired didn't begin to cover it. Wedding preparations. So much to arrange. I heard this Saturday. Yes. They stood in silence, acutely aware of the space between them, of the eyes that might be watching. The spring sun beat down, and she could smell sage on the wind. Annabeth, he stopped, jaw clenching. Miss Whitlow, if you need anything, if you're ever... He seemed to struggle for words. The stable in town, where I sometimes stay. There's a loose board in the back wall, third from the left, behind it, in case you ever need... Mr. Kane. Samuel's voice cut through the air like a blade. He stood at her elbow, having approached with the stealth of a predator. I wasn't aware you knew my fiancé. We met briefly when Miss Whitlow arrived. Jessie's voice was carefully neutral. I sometimes do work for you. Mr. Hargrove helped shoe your stallion last month. Ah, yes, the stable hand. Samuel's tone made it sound like something scraped off a boot. His hand came to rest on Annabeth's elbow, the grip just shy of painful. Well, we mustn't keep you from your work. Jessie's eyes flicked to where Samuel's fingers pressed into her arm, and something dangerous flashed across his face, but he simply touched his hat again. Ma'am, Mr. Hargrove. As he walked away, Samuel's grip tightened. You'll not speak to him again. I was merely being polite. You were making a spectacle of yourself, chatting with laborers in the churchyard like a common... He stopped, but she heard the unspoken word. We have standards to maintain. Annabeth, my wife does not associate with men like that. That night, she lay in her cold bed and touched her arm, where bruises were already forming in the shape of Samuel's fingers. Through her window, she could see the stars, so many more than in Philadelphia, scattered like spilled silver across the black vault of sky. Somewhere out there, Jessie Kane was looking at the same stars. She wondered if he thought of her, wondered if he regretted that moment in the stable when they'd stood too close and recognized something in each other that had no name. The night before her wedding, she couldn't sleep. The house was tomb quiet. Samuel having retired to his room hours ago after reviewing and approving her final letter to Philadelphia. She'd wanted to write the truth, that she was frightened, that Samuel Hargrove was not the man his letters had portrayed, that she woke each day feeling more like property than a person. Instead, the approved letter spoke of her joy at finding such a respectable match, her eagerness to begin her new life. Unable to bear the stuffiness of her room any longer, she crept downstairs and out through the kitchen door. The night air was cool on her fevered skin, and she breathed deeply, tasting freedom. She found herself in the stable without quite meaning to go there. The horses nickered softly at her approach, and she ran her hands along their warm necks, finding comfort in their simple acceptance. These were Samuel's horses, expensive, well-bred creatures with papers documenting their lineage back generations, but they were still just horses, warm and alive and real in a way nothing in that cold house was. You shouldn't be here. She spun around. Samuel stood in the doorway, still fully dressed despite the late hour. His pale eyes seemed to glow in the lamplight. I couldn't sleep, she said, hating how her voice trembled. I thought a walk. You thought. He moved closer, and she instinctively backed against the stall door. That's your problem. Annabeth, you think too much, feel too much. I had hoped to train these impulses out of you gently, but perhaps a firmer hand is required. Samuel, Mr. Hargrove, he corrected coldly. Even in private, especially in private, you will show proper respect. Mr. Hargrove. The words tasted like bile. I meant no harm. You simply nothing. He was close enough now that she could smell the brandy on his breath. "You are to be my wife tomorrow. My property and all but law already. You do not leave the house without my permission. You do not speak to men beneath our station. You do not think or feel or want anything I have not approved. Is that understood?" She thought of Jesse's warning about breaking. Thought of her mother, dying of shame and poverty after her father's business failed. Thought of the 17 cents that had been her entire fortune just days ago. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand. Good." He stepped back, smoothing his vest. "Return to your room. Tomorrow you become Mrs. Hargrove, and these childish rebellions will end. Do not make me remind you again." She fled back to the house, his eyes burning into her back. In her room, she pressed her face into the pillow and finally let the tears come. Tomorrow she would put on the white dress Mrs. Corbett had altered to fit. Tomorrow she would stand before God and promise to honor and obey a man who saw her as no more than a broodmare with delusions of independence. She thought of a loose board in a stable wall, third from the left, thought of dark eyes and gentle hands and a voice that said her name like it meant something. But thinking and wanting were luxuries she could no longer afford. Tomorrow, Annabeth Whitlow would disappear, and Mrs. Samuel Hargrove would take her place, the woman who'd shared a dusty stable with Jesse Kane, who'd felt alive for the first time in years, who'd imagined a different life for just one night. That woman would have to die. It was the only way to survive. The letter changed everything. It arrived 3 months after the wedding, delivered by Jesse himself on a day when Samuel was away on business. Annabeth saw him through the parlor window, sitting tall on his bay mare, hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. Her heart crashed against her ribs as Mrs. Corbett went to answer the door. "Mail delivery for Mrs. Hargrove," she heard Jesse say. "From the postal office. They said it was important." She forced herself to remain seated, hands steady on her embroidery. As Mrs. Corbett brought the letter, but her eyes betrayed her, seeking Jesse through the window. He was still there, pretending to adjust his saddle while clearly waiting. "That will be all, Mrs. Corbett," Annabeth said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. When the housekeeper left, she turned the letter over. No return address, but she recognized the shaky script. Her mother's cousin in Philadelphia, the one who'd raised her after her parents died, the one Samuel had forbidden her from writing to after their last exchange, claiming the woman was filling her head with Eastern nonsense. Inside, she found a note in Jesse's hand, hidden under your horse's saddle blanket. "He can't stop what he doesn't know exists." Her hands trembled as she read her cousin's words. The woman was dying, wanted to see her once more, had sent money for the journey, money that Samuel would never know about if she was careful. Through the window, Jesse touched his hat and rode away. That night, as Samuel reviewed ledgers in his study, Annabeth slipped out to the stable. Sure enough, beneath Starling's saddle blanket, her mare, the one luxury Samuel had permitted her, lay a small cloth bag. Inside, $40 in bills and coins, and another note from Jesse. "If you ever need to run." She pressed the bag to her chest, tears burning her eyes. $40, enough to get to Philadelphia, enough to start over, enough to escape. But not yet, not while Samuel watched her every move, reviewed every letter, controlled every breath. She hid the money behind the loose board in Starling's stall, the third plank from the left, just like the one Jesse had mentioned at his stable in town. The beating came a week later. Samuel had found her writing in her diary, the one private thing she'd managed to keep hidden. She'd been foolish, leaving it on her dresser while she bathed. When she emerged, he was sitting on her bed, reading. "I dreamed of the stable again," he quoted, his voice deadly quiet. "Of hay and leather and freedom. Poetry, my dear, or something else." "It's nothing, just silly thoughts." He backhanded her so fast she didn't see it coming. Pain exploded across her cheek as she stumbled against the washstand. "You dream of stables." He stood, her diary still in his hand. "You write of freedom. Tell me, wife, what stable? Whose freedom?" "Our stable," she gasped, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. I only meant lies. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging deep. You think I'm blind? Think I don't see how you look toward town? How you linger with the horses? His grip tightened until she cried out, Whose bed do you dream of sharing? Whore! No one's. Samuel, please! The second blow knocked her to the floor. Then his boots, his fists. Careful to hit where the bruises wouldn't show. When it was over, she lay curled on the Turkish rug, ribs screaming, breath coming in shallow gasps. You're my wife, he said, straightening his cuffs as if nothing had happened. My property. If I even suspect you've dishonored me, dishonored the Hargrove name, I'll do worse than this. Far worse. Remember that. He left her there. It was Lily May who found her an hour later. Lily May, the silent housemaid who never spoke, whose tongue had been cut out years ago by a previous employer. The woman's dark eyes filled with understanding as she helped Annabeth to bed, brought cool cloths for the bruises, asked no questions that couldn't be answered anyway. That night, Annabeth made her decision. She would run, not to Philadelphia. Samuel would look for her there, but somewhere, anywhere, as soon as she could walk without limping, as soon as the bruises faded enough that she could travel without drawing attention. She began to plan, studying Samuel's routines, noting when he was gone longest, hiding small things, a change of clothes, dried food pilfered from the kitchen, a knife from the garden shed, all cached behind Starling's loose board. 2 weeks later, her chance came. Samuel announced a 3-day trip to Tucson on business. The morning he left, she forced herself to play the perfect wife, serving his breakfast, accepting his cold kiss, waving from the porch until his carriage disappeared over the horizon. Then she ran, not immediately. That would rouse suspicion. She waited until afternoon, told Mrs. Corbett she had a headache and would be resting, slipped out through the kitchen while the staff took their midday meal, saddled Starling with shaking hands, retrieved her hidden cash. The ride to town had never seemed longer. Every sound made her heart race. Was that hoofbeats behind her? Samuel returned early, but the road remained empty save for dust devils and her own racing thoughts. Jessie's stable stood at the edge of town, weathered and welcoming. She found the loose board, third from the left, and behind it, a canteen of water, more money, and a map with a route marked in pencil, north toward Colorado Territory. Town circled where a woman might find work, might disappear. She was studying the map when she heard the door open behind her. Knew you'd come eventually. She spun around. Jessie stood silhouetted in the doorway, looking exactly as he had that first day. Worn denim, rolled sleeves, eyes that saw too much. How did you? Saw you ride in. Figured it was time. He moved closer, and in the dim light she saw his jaw tighten as he took in her appearance. She'd tried to hide the worst of it, but the bruise on her cheek had faded to sickly yellow-green, still visible despite her best efforts with powder. Jesus! Annabeth? What did he do to you? Nothing I didn't expect. The lie tasted bitter. I'm leaving. Today. I just need... You need to rest. His voice was gentle but firm. You're swaying on your feet. When's the last time you ate? She couldn't remember. The past weeks were a blur of pain and planning. I don't have time. He'll be back in 2 days. And you'll be long gone, but not like this. Not half dead and likely to fall off your horse before you make 10 miles. He took her elbow, carefully, so different from Samuel's bruising grip. Come on. He led her to a small room at the back of the stable, his living quarters. She realized, sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a pot-bellied stove, and a table with 2 chairs. He sat her down and busied himself at the stove, heating something that smelled like stew. You don't have to eat, he said, setting a bowl before her. Then we'll talk. The stew was simple but good, and she found herself ravenous once she started. Jessie sat across from her, those dark eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he poured coffee from a battered pot, added a generous amount of sugar without asking. Somehow he knew she needed the sweetness. Where will you go? He asked finally. North, the map, is one option. But there's another. He leaned back, studying her. East, toward New Mexico territory. I know people there, good people who wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't care that you're running from a husband. Why? The word came out cracked. Why are you helping me? You know why. And God help her. She did. It was there in his eyes. Had been since that first night in the stable. The thing they'd both tried to ignore. The pull that had nothing to do with gratitude or kindness, and everything to do with recognition. Like calling to Jesse, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Not expecting anything. Just want you safe. Away from him. He'll come after me. Let him try. There was something dangerous in Jesse's voice now. A reminder that this gentle man had violence in his past. I've faced worse than Samuel Hargrove. She believed him. Wanted to ask about the scar through his eyebrow. About the debts he'd mentioned. About why a man who could handle horses like he did was content to work in a stable. But there wasn't time. I should go, she said, though every part of her wanted to stay in this warm, safe room. The longer I wait, you'll stay tonight. It wasn't a question. Rest. Let me tend those ribs. I can see how you're holding yourself. Leave it first light when you're stronger. If someone sees me here, they won't. And even if they did, you're a married woman collecting a debt your husband is owed. I've been telling folks for weeks that Hargrove commissioned specialty tack from a craftsman back east, that I'd need to settle accounts when it arrived. He smiled grimly. Your husband's reputation for squeezing every penny will work in our favor. No one will question it. She wanted to protest, but exhaustion was pulling at her like an undertow. The weeks of planning, of fear, of constant vigilance had taken their toll, and Jesse's presence was like a balm to her battered spirit, calm, steady, asking nothing but offering everything. All right, she whispered. Just tonight. He gave her his bed, insisting on taking the floor despite her protests. But first, with infinite gentleness, he tended her injuries. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed while he knelt before her, applying salve to the bruises with hands that shook slightly. I'll kill him for this, he said quietly, fingers ghosting over a particularly dark mark on her ribs. No. She caught his hand. Promise me. Whatever happens, you won't go after him. I couldn't bear it if... She stopped, but they both heard the unspoken words. If something happened to you because of me. Annabeth? Her name on his lips was a prayer, a promise, a plea. His hand turned in hers, fingers intertwining. That first night, in the stable. Don't! She closed her eyes. Please, I can't. Not now. Maybe not ever. I know. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. Rest. I'll be right here if you need anything. She lay down fully clothed, too weary to care about propriety. Jesse spread a blanket on the floor nearby, his presence both comfort and torment. In the darkness, she could hear his breathing, could feel the weight of unspoken words between them. Tell me about New Mexico, she said softly. His voice came warm through the darkness. There's a town called Cimarron, small but growing. A woman there runs a boarding house, Mrs. Elena Valdez. Good woman. Lost her own husband to violence. Understands about starting over. She'd take you in, help you find work. Maybe as a seamstress or teacher. You'd be safe there. And you? Do you ever go to Cimarron? A pause. Sometimes. To deliver horses. She closed her eyes, letting herself imagine it. A boarding house in a town where no one knew her. Work that was her own. And sometimes, maybe, a man on a bay mare would arrive with horses to sell, would touch his hat and smile that careful smile. It wasn't the life she'd dreamed of as a girl, but it was freedom. It was possibility. It was enough. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. Sleep, Annabeth. Tomorrow comes soon enough. But sleep eluded her for a long time. Instead, she lay listening to Jesse breathe, memorizing the sound, the feeling of safety he brought, because tomorrow she would ride away, would become someone new in a place where Samuel couldn't find her. And Jesse would stay here, would continue his quiet life, would pretend they had never shared these moments in the darkness. It was better this way. Cleaner, safer. So why did it feel like another kind of breaking? When dawn light filtered through the single window, she rose to find Jessie already awake, saddling Starling, packing her saddlebags with additional supplies. He'd even thought to include a man's hat and duster, to help disguise you from a distance. He explained. And this, he handed her a bill of sale, shows you bought the horse fair and square from me. Dates from last month, if anyone questions you. She took the paper with trembling hands. He'd thought of everything, had spent the night preparing for her departure while she slept. The care of it, the selflessness, made her throat tight. Jessie, Time to go, he said gently. Want to get you on the road before town wakes up. He helped her mount, hands lingering at her waist. For a moment they stayed frozen like that, her looking down at him looking up at her, everything they couldn't say hanging between them like morning mist. Then he stepped back, handed her the reins. There's a letter in your saddlebag. For Mrs. Valdez. She'll know what to do. Will I? She stopped, swallowed. Will you write? Let me know you're all right. You know I can't. He'll be watching my mail, looking for any sign of where you've gone. His jaw worked. But I'll know. Somehow. I'll know you're safe. That's enough. She wanted to weep, wanted to climb down from the horse and into his arms, wanted to ask him to come with her, to leave everything behind and chase a different life together. Instead, she straightened her spine, gathered the reins. Goodbye, Jessie Kane. Goodbye, Annabeth Whitlow. Not Hargrove. Never Hargrove. Even now. He gave her back herself. She turned Starling toward the road, toward the mountains, toward a future uncertain but her own. Behind her, she felt Jessie watching, standing guard over her flight as he had guarded her secrets. She didn't look back. Couldn't. But miles later, when Red Hollow had vanished into the desert heat and she was alone with the vast sky, she finally let the tears come. Not for Samuel or the life she was leaving, not even for the bruises that still ached with each movement. She wept for the man she left standing in a stable door, for the life they might have built if the world were different, for the love they'd never named aloud, but that lived in every careful touch, every loaded silence, every act of grace between them. Then she dried her tears, squared her shoulders, and rode on. Freedom waited, and maybe, someday, something more. Samuel Hargrove returned from Tucson a day early, dust-covered and irritable from a deal gone sour. He knew something was wrong the moment his carriage rolled through the gates. The house felt different, emptier, though he couldn't say why. "Where is my wife?" he demanded of Mrs. Corbett, who met him at the door with pinched features. She's been indisposed, sir. Hasn't left her room since yesterday morning." He took the stairs 2 at a time, burst through her door without knocking. The room was empty. The bed unslept in. Her wardrobe stood open. Gaps where dresses should hang. The ivory brush he'd bought her, gone. The rage that filled him was ice cold. Calculated, he'd been made a fool. His property had fled, and someone had helped her. He was certain of that. Annabeth lacked the spine to run on her own. "Saddle my horse," he barked at the stable boy. "And send word to Sheriff Watson. Tell him to meet me in town, now." It didn't take long to piece together where she'd gone first. Only one man in Red Hollow had looked at his wife with such barely concealed want. Only one man would dare. Jessie Kane was shoeing a horse when Samuel arrived. Sheriff Watson and 2 deputies in tow. The stable hand straightened slowly, setting down his tools with deliberate calm. "Hargrove," Jessie said evenly. "Sheriff, where is she?" Samuel's voice could have cut glass. "Where's who?" The blow came fast, Samuel's fist connecting with Jessie's jaw. The younger man stumbled but didn't fall, didn't even raise his hands to defend himself. "My wife, you bastard! Where did you send her?" Jessie spat blood, then smiled, a terrible, satisfied smile. "Don't know what you're talking about? Search the place," Samuel ordered. The sheriff hesitated only a moment before nodding to his deputies. They tore through Jessie's modest quarters, upending his few possessions, ripping apart the narrow bed, found nothing but what any man might own: clothes, tools, a Bible with pressed flowers between its pages. "She was here," Samuel insisted. "I know she was here. Even if she was," Sheriff Watson said carefully, "ain't illegal for a woman to visit a stable. Maybe she was collecting a debt, or—" "She's my wife. She belongs to me." Samuel's control cracked, revealing the ugliness beneath. "This man seduced her, turned her against me. That's a crime." "You have proof?" the sheriff asked, though his tone suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Samuel Hargrove paid well, but there were limits. "I have proof." Samuel lied smoothly. "Letters, witnesses who saw them together, enough to see him hang." Jesse's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stance. "If you had proof, we wouldn't be talking. You'd have already strung me up. Give me time." Samuel stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper only Jesse could hear. "I'll find her, and when I do, I'll make sure she tells everyone exactly what you did to her, how you forced yourself on a married woman, how you corrupted her, and then I'll watch you swing." "Mr. Hargrove," Jesse said, loud enough for all to hear, "I'm sorry your wife has gone missing. Must be a blow to a man's pride. But I don't know where she is, and you can't prove otherwise. So unless the sheriff's arresting me for shoeing horses, I'd like you off my property." Samuel's hand went to the pistol at his hip, but Watson intervened. "Come on now, Mr. Hargrove. No cause for that. We'll make inquiries. Put out word. If she's out there, we'll find her. I want him watched." Samuel spat. "Day and night. He'll slip up. Try to join her. Can't spare men for that without evidence," Watson said apologetically. "But we'll keep an eye out." They left. But Samuel's promise hung in the air like smoke. Jesse returned to his work, hands steady despite the blood still trickling from his lip. But that night, he sat down and wrote 2 letters. The first to Mrs. Elena Valdez in Cimarron, warning her. The second to a newspaper editor in Santa Fe, a man who owed him a favor and had no love for wealthy tyrants. The trial, when it came, was a travesty of justice. It took Samuel 3 weeks to manufacture his evidence. A maid who swore she'd seen Jesse leaving the Hargrove house at odd hours. Never mind that she'd been beaten into compliance. A forged letter in what purported to be Annabeth's hand, confessing her shame at being led astray. A traveling merchant who claimed to have seen Jesse and Annabeth together on the road, his debts to Hargrove mysteriously forgiven afterward. Jesse was arrested on a Tuesday morning, dragged from the stable in chains. The charge, criminal seduction and alienation of affection. In the court of public opinion, he was already guilty. A stable hand who dared reach above his station, who'd stolen another man's wife. The trial lasted 2 days. Judge Morrison, a frequent dinner guest at the Hargrove estate, presided with barely concealed bias. Jesse's lawyer, the only one in town willing to take the case, was young and overwhelmed. "Did you or did you not assist Mrs. Hargrove in leaving her husband?" the prosecutor demanded. Jesse looked him in the eye. "I helped a woman in distress. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty." "So you admit to facilitating her abandonment of her lawful husband?" "I admit to showing basic human decency to someone who needed it." The gallery murmured, some with sympathy, most with condemnation. The good wives of Red Hollow clutched their husbands' arms, scandalized by the very idea. Samuel took the stand, the picture of wounded dignity. He spoke of his love for Annabeth, his generosity in taking a penniless Eastern girl and giving her everything, how Jesse had poisoned her mind, seduced her with false promises. She was innocent before he corrupted her, Samuel said, managing to squeeze out what might have been a tear. Now she's ruined, cast out, all because of this man's lust. Jesse's lawyer tried. He asked about Annabeth's bruises, about why a happy wife would flee. But Judge Morrison sustained every objection, blocked every line of questioning that might have revealed the truth. When Jesse took the stand in his own defense, he was magnificent. "Yes, I helped her leave," he said clearly, "because I've seen what happens to horses that are beaten too often. They break, or they turn mean, or they die inside. Mrs. Hargrove was dying inside. You claim Mr. Hargrove abused his wife? The prosecutor sneered. Where's your proof? The proof left town to save her life. Convenient. Or perhaps she left because you seduced her, promised her things you couldn't deliver. I promised her nothing. Jesse's voice rang through the courtroom. I gave her a map, some money, and a chance at freedom. If that makes me guilty, then I'll hang for it. But I'll hang knowing I did right. And did you compromise her virtue? Did you take advantage of a vulnerable woman? Jesse was silent for a long moment. Then, Mrs. Hargrove's virtue was never in question. She's the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known. Whatever she chose, wherever she is now, it's because she chose it, not because I or any man led her astray. But it wasn't enough. The jury, 12 men who owed Samuel money or favors or feared his influence, deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty of criminal seduction, guilty of alienation of affection, guilty of corrupting a virtuous woman and destroying a sacred marriage. The sentence, death by hanging. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, happy to see justice done. Others, a precious few, looked troubled. Jesse stood straight-backed as the verdict was read, his eyes finding Samuel's across the room. What passed between them needed no words. You've won nothing. Jesse's expression said, We'll see. Samuel's replied. In his cell, Jesse received few visitors. The minister came, trying to extract a confession, and left frustrated. His lawyer came, spoke of appeals that both knew would go nowhere. But on the third night, an unexpected figure slipped through the shadows. Lily May, Samuel's mute housemaid, appeared at his cell window. She couldn't speak, but she could write, and she pressed a note through the bars. She made it to Cimarron. She's safe. Thought you should know. Jesse closed his eyes, relief flooding through him. Thank you, he whispered. Lily May produced another paper. This one was longer, written in a different hand. A statement, a testimony. The truth about Samuel Hargrove, signed by 3 former servants who'd fled his employ. Stories of abuse, of cruelty, of his first wife's suspicious death. Get this to the newspaper in Santa Fe, Jesse urged. The editor there, Thomas Brennan, he'll know what to do. She nodded and vanished into the night. The story broke 2 days before Jesse's scheduled execution. The truth about Samuel Hargrove. Former servants speak out. It spread like wildfire, reprinted in papers across the territory. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. People began asking questions. Why had so many servants left Hargrove's employ? What really happened to his first wife? Why would a woman with everything flee into the desert? A crowd gathered outside the jail, not calling for Jesse's blood, but for justice, real justice. Samuel arrived at the jail that night, alone. Sheriff Watson, suddenly reluctant to be associated with the case. Let him pass. You think this changes anything? Samuel hissed through the bars. You'll still hang, and when you're dead, I'll find her. I'll bring her back, and I'll make her pay for every moment of humiliation. Jesse rose from his cot, approached the bars. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost pitying. You still don't understand, do you? She's already won. She's free. And whether I hang or not, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that she chose death in the desert over another day with you. That's the truth you can't escape. Hargrove, she saw what you really are, and she ran. Samuel's control snapped. He reached through the bars, grabbed Jesse's shirt, yanked him forward. Tell me where she is. Never. The struggle was brief but violent. Samuel produced a knife, later. No one could say from where, and drove it between the bars. Jesse twisted, but in the confined space, couldn't entirely avoid it. The blade caught him in the side, drawing blood. Guards! Jesse shouted, and they came running. They found Samuel Hargrove holding a bloody knife, Jesse bleeding but alive, and suddenly the entire case looked different. Attempted murder in front of witnesses. A wealthy man so consumed by rage he'd tried to kill a prisoner in custody. The very fact that he'd brought a weapon suggested premeditation. By morning, Samuel Hargrove was in chains. Jesse was in the infirmary, and the governor was reviewing the case. Public opinion, already turning, now swung completely. Telegrams poured in from across the territory. Newspaper editors who'd been following the story demanded answers. The hanging was postponed, then postponed again, then, quietly, the charges were dropped. Insufficient evidence, Judge Morrison declared, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. And given Mr. Hargrove's recent actions, the court questions the reliability of previous testimony. Jesse walked out of the courthouse on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after he'd been dragged away in chains. The same crowd that might have cheered his execution now parted respectfully. Some nodded. A few of the braver women whispered, "God bless." He returned to his stable to find it exactly as he'd left it. His few friends had cared for the horses, kept the business running. Everything waited for him to resume his quiet life. But something had changed in Red Hollow. The truth, once spoken, couldn't be silenced. Samuel Hargrove, out on bail for attempted murder, found his business partners suddenly unavailable. His credit, once golden, turned to lead. The big house on the hill stood increasingly empty as servants fled and suppliers refused to deliver. Jesse heard it all but took no satisfaction in it. He worked his horses, mended tack, and tried not to think about a woman with green eyes and courage bigger than the desert sky. Then, one evening, as he was closing up the stable, Sheriff Watson appeared. "Thought you should know," the sheriff said awkwardly. "Hargrove lit out last night, took what money he could and headed south. Mexico, most likely. Won't be coming back." Jesse nodded, unsurprised. Men like Samuel Hargrove were survivors. Cockroaches who scuttled away when the light got too bright. "There's more," Watson continued. "That wife of his, widow, I suppose. Since the marriage is invalid now, she's been cleared of any wrongdoing. Free to come back if she wants, though I suspect she won't." "No," Jesse agreed quietly. "She won't." Watson shifted his weight. "For what it's worth, Kane, I'm sorry. About all of it. Should have seen the truth sooner. You saw what you were paid to see. We all do, sometimes." After the sheriff left, Jesse sat in the gathering darkness, considering. Hargrove was gone. Annabeth was free, truly, legally free, and he was still just a stable hand with scarred hands and too many memories. But for the first time in years, the debt felt paid. The weight he'd carried since another violent man in another town had fallen beneath his fists. It lifted. He could leave Red Hollow now, could head to New Mexico territory, could see if a certain boarding house had room for one more, or he could stay, continue his quiet life, and trust that Annabeth Whitlow was building something new and good without him. The choice, he realized, was finally his to make, just as hers had been. In the stable, the horses nickered softly, settling for the night. Jesse rose, checked their water, their feed, then stepped outside. The stars were coming out, brilliant in the clear desert air. Somewhere under these same stars, Annabeth was looking up at freedom. "Be happy," he whispered to the night. "Be free, be everything he tried to stop you from being." Then he went inside and began to pack, because sometimes, when the debt is paid and the road is clear, a man has to choose between safety and possibility. And Jesse Kane had played it safe long enough. The knock came at midnight, soft but insistent. Annabeth woke instantly, months of vigilance having trained her to sleep light. She reached for the derringer she kept beneath her pillow, a gift from Mrs. Valdez, who understood that women running from violent men needed more than prayers for protection. "Who is it?" she called through the door of her small room above the boarding house kitchen. "Someone who needs to speak with Anna Whitman." Her heart stopped. Anna Whitman was the name she'd taken in Cimarron, but the voice, though muffled by wood and exhaustion, was one she'd know anywhere. She opened the door to find Jesse slumped against the frame. hat in hand, travel-worn and fevered. The wound in his side, the one Samuel had given him in that jail cell, had clearly never healed right. Blood seeped through his shirt. "Jesse," she breathed, catching him as he swayed. "Dear God, what are you doing here?" "Had to warn you," he managed, letting her guide him inside. "Samuel's men, they found out where you are. Coming for you." She eased him onto her narrow bed, hands already working at his shirt buttons. The wound was infected, angry red streaks spreading from the ragged scar. "How did you—" "Lily May. She got word to me. Overheard Samuel's lawyer talking. Even from Mexico. He's sending men to drag you back." His hand caught hers. Grip weak but urgent. "You have to run? Tonight? Hush." She pressed him back as he tried to rise. "I'm not going anywhere. Not without you. Annabeth." "Anna?" she corrected softly. Finding her medical supplies. Mrs. Valdez had taught her some healing arts, skills necessary for women who couldn't always afford or trust doctors. "Anna Whitman, seamstress and sometimes midwife. Annabeth Hargrove is dead. You're not safe. I haven't been safe since the day I answered Samuel's advertisement. But I'm free. There's a difference." She worked as she talked, cleaning the wound, applying a poultice that made him hiss through his teeth. "How long have you been riding with this festering?" 3 days, maybe 4, lost track." 3 days of agony, pushing through fever and pain to warn her. She blinked back tears, focused on the work. "You foolish, wonderful man." He caught her hand again, steadier this time. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not seeing what he was sooner. For letting you marry him. For not being able to protect you. Stop." She framed his face with her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You saved me. In every way a person can be saved. Now let me save you." She worked through the night, fighting the infection with everything she knew. Mrs. Valdez, wakened by the commotion, brought stronger medicines, asked no questions beyond what was needed. The older woman had seen too much of the world to be shocked by midnight arrivals or women nursing men who weren't their husbands. By dawn, Jesse's fever had broken. He slept fitfully while Annabeth kept watch, the derringer in her lap, listening for hoofbeats that would signal Samuel's men. They came at noon. 3 riders, dust-covered and hard-eyed, tied their horses outside the boarding house. Annabeth watched from her window as they spoke to merchants, showed a photograph, her wedding portrait. She realized, the one Samuel had commissioned, where she looked pale and trapped in white lace. "They're here," she told Mrs. Valdez, who was changing Jesse's bandages. The older woman's face hardened. "Then we give them nothing. Anna Whitman has lived here 4 months, quiet and respectable. That woman in their picture? Never seen her. They won't believe. They will." Mrs. Valdez smiled grimly. "Because the whole town will tell them the same. We protect our own here." And they did. The baker swore he'd never seen the woman in the photograph. The blacksmith scratched his head, suggested they try Albuquerque. Even the saloon girls, who knew every face in town, looked blank and apologetic. But Annabeth knew it was only a delay. These men were professionals, hired guns who wouldn't give up easily. That night, as Jesse struggled toward consciousness, she made a decision. "We're leaving," she told him when his eyes finally focused. "Both of us. As soon as you can ride. I won't let you throw away everything you've built here for me." "I'm not." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "I'm choosing to build something new. With you. If you'll have me." His expression was raw, vulnerable. "Annabeth, Anna, I've got nothing to offer. No money, no prospects. Just a half-healed wound and a reputation as a man who steals wives. Good thing I'm not looking for a husband then." She squeezed his hand. "Just a partner, someone who sees me as a person, not property. Someone who'd ride 3 days with a festering wound to keep me safe. You deserve better. I deserve choice. And I choose you, Jesse Kane, if you'll have me." He was quiet for a long moment, searching her face. Then, slowly, he brought her hand to his lips. "Till the day I die." They left Cimarron 2 nights later. Under a new moon. Mrs. Valdez had arranged everything. Fresh horses, supplies, even new papers identifying them as Thomas and Mary Kane, heading west to California. The boarding house matron embraced Annabeth fiercely, pressed extra ammunition into her hands.
"Live well,"
she whispered. "It's the best revenge." They rode hard the first night, putting distance between themselves and Samuel's hunters. Jessie, still weak but determined, matched her pace without complaint. They spoke little, saving their energy for the journey. But Annabeth felt the connection between them like a physical thing, stronger now for being chosen rather than stolen. Dawn found them in the foothills, hidden in a grove of cottonwoods by a small stream, while the horses drank. Jessie spread their bedrolls and built a small, smokeless fire. Annabeth heated beans and dried meat, the simple meal feeling like a feast after the night's flight. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, settling beside him on a fallen log. "There's a place I know, north of here, in Colorado territory. A valley where a man could raise horses, maybe run some cattle, build a cabin." He glanced at her. "If that suits you." "It suits me fine." She leaned against his shoulder, felt him tense, then relax. "Tell me about it. Tell me." He spoke of green meadows and clear streams, of mountains that touched the sky and winters that sealed the world in white silence, of a life simple and hard but honest. As he talked, she could see it, a small cabin with smoke rising from the chimney, corrals full of horses, maybe children playing in the yard. A life chosen, not arranged. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Isolated, rough, nothing like what you had with—" "Stop comparing." She turned to face him fully. "What I had with Samuel was a prison with silk curtains. What you're offering is freedom. There's no comparison." He touched her face then, fingers gentle on her cheek. "How did I get so lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it." She covered his hand with hers. "We chose each other. That's not luck, that's faith." They were 3 days into the mountains when Samuel's men caught up. Annabeth heard them first. Horses pushed too hard, breathing rough on the trail below. She and Jessie were traversing a narrow path along a ridge. No room to run, nowhere to hide. "Keep riding," Jessie said quietly, checking his rifle. "There's a wider spot ahead. If it comes to shooting, we shoot together or not at all." He gave her a look that was equal parts exasperation and admiration. "Stubborn woman. You knew that when you chose me." The riders appeared around a bend, the same 3 from Cimarron, plus 2 more. Professional killers, all of them, with dead eyes and ready guns. They spread out, blocking retreat. "Mrs. Hargrove," the leader called. His voice was cultured, at odds with his rough appearance. "Your husband wants you home." "I have no husband," Annabeth replied clearly. "Samuel Hargrove is nothing to me. The law says different, and Mr. Hargrove is paying us well to enforce the law." "The law?" Jessie laughed bitterly. "Since when do hired guns care about the law?" "Since it pays." The leader's hand moved toward his pistol. "Now, you can come quiet, ma'am. Or we can do this ugly— Your choice." "I've made my choice." Annabeth drew the derringer from her coat. "And I'll die before I go back to him." "Probably. But your friend here will die first. That what you want?" She saw Jessie tense, ready to move, to put himself between her and the guns, always trying to protect her, even now. But she was done being protected, done letting others pay for her freedom. "You know what Samuel is," she said, addressing all of them now. "You know what he does to women. How can you— Lady, for what he's paying. I'd drag my own mother back to him." The leader drew his gun. "Last chance." Everything happened at once. Jessie shoved her sideways just as the first shot rang out. She heard him grunt, saw him twist and fire his rifle. One of the riders fell. Then chaos. Gunfire echoing off canyon walls. Horses screaming, the acrid smell of powder smoke. Annabeth fired the derringer. Saw another man clutch his shoulder. Grabbed Jessie's pistol from his holster, kept shooting, beside her. Jessie worked the rifle with deadly efficiency, but she could see blood spreading across his shirt, The old wound had torn open. When the smoke cleared, 3 of the 5 attackers were down. The other 2 had fled, wanting easier prey. But Jesse was on his knees, face gray with pain. "Jesse!" She caught him as he toppled, cradled his head in her lap. "So much blood. Too much. Did we win?" His voice was thread-thin. Yes, we won." Tears streamed down her face. "Stay with me, please." "Always meant to." He reached up, touched her cheek with bloody fingers. "Worth it. You're worth everything. Don't you dare die on me. Jesse Kane, not now. Not when we're so close to that valley." "The valley?" He smiled, eyes going distant. "Would have been nice. We'll be nice. When you're healed. When we get there." She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stem the flow. "You promised. Till the day you die. You said that day isn't today." His hand covered hers, weak but warm. "Stubborn woman." "That's right. Too stubborn to let you go." She looked around desperately. They needed help, needed shelter. Through her tears, she spotted something, a trail of smoke rising from the forest below. "There's someone down there. A cabin or camp. I'm going to get you help." "Anna." "No, you don't get to say goodbye." She pulled off her coat, folded it into a pad against his wound. "You're going to live, and we're going to build that cabin, and raise those horses, and have the life we chose. Do you hear me?" He managed a nod, but his eyes were closing. She pressed a fierce kiss to his forehead, then began the impossible task of getting him onto her horse. He was heavy, barely conscious, but desperation gave her strength. She tied him to the saddle, mounted behind him, and urged the horse down the treacherous slope toward that promise of smoke. The cabin belonged to a trapper named Eugene Walsh, a gruff, solitary man who asked no questions about the blood or the gunfire echoing from the ridge. His Cherokee wife, called simply Rose, took one look at Jesse and began preparing her medicines. "He'll live," she pronounced after a tense hour of treatment. "If he's strong, if he wants to. He's the strongest man I know," Annabeth said, not moving from Jesse's side. "And you?" Rose studied her with knowing eyes. "You strong enough for this life? It's not easy, loving a man with enemies. I've been someone's property. I've been beaten and controlled and treated like livestock." Annabeth met the older woman's gaze steadily. "This life, with a man who sees me as equal, who'd bleed for my freedom. This is the easy choice." Rose smiled. "Then he'll live. Men like that, they don't leave women like you. Not by choice." For 3 days, Jesse hovered between life and death. Annabeth never left him, spooning broth between his lips, changing bandages, talking constantly about their valley, their horses, their future. On the 4th day, his fever broke. On the 5th, he opened his eyes and spoke her name. "Which one?" she asked, tears of relief streaming down her face. "All of them." His voice was weak but clear. "Annabeth, Anna, Mary, mine." She kissed him then, gentle and careful and full of promise. When they parted, he was smiling. "So," he whispered, "about that valley. What about it? Think we could make it before the snow?" She laughed, the sound bright in the dim cabin. "Jesse Kane, are you proposing we travel while you still have a hole in your chest?" "I'm proposing we live." His hand found hers, squeezed with returning strength. Together, free, starting now. Eugene Walsh, listening from across the cabin, snorted. "Fool boy. Takes 6 weeks minimum for a wound like that to heal enough for travel." 4, Jesse countered. 6, Rose said firmly. "And you'll winter here. Learn some sense. Come spring, this valley you speak of will still be there." Annabeth looked at Jesse, saw the same thought in his eyes. Spring was months away, months of hiding, of waiting, of Samuel's shadow hanging over them. "Or," she said slowly, "we could send word that we died on that ridge. Let Samuel think his men succeeded, that we're both dead." "The 2 who ran," Jesse began, "were cowards who won't admit failure. They'll lie, say the job was done." She turned to Eugene. "Would you post a letter for us? To a newspaper editor in Santa Fe?" The trapper shrugged. For a price. Within a week, the story ran in 3 territories. Tragedy on Blue Mountain. Fugitive couple dies in shootout with bounty hunters. It included enough truth to be believed. The location. The dead men found on the ridge. Evidence of a woman's presence. But the bodies of Jesse Kane and the woman known as Anna Whitman were, tragically, never recovered, presumed dead, consumed by the wilderness they'd fled to. Samuel Hargrove, receiving the news in Mexico, celebrated with expensive whiskey. Justice. He called it. The newspaper clipping went into his safe, proof that his property had been destroyed rather than stolen. Meanwhile, in a trapper's cabin high in the Colorado mountains, Thomas and Mary Kane, newlyweds, according to the certificate Eugene Walsh produced with suspicious convenience, planned their future. Winter sealed them in with snow and silence, but Annabeth had never felt freer. She learned to trap from Eugene, to heal from Rose. Jesse regained his strength slowly, carving furniture for their future home while he healed. They were married again, properly this time, with Rose's prayers and Eugene's gruff blessing and the mountains as witness. "Third time's the charm," Jesse said, slipping a ring made from horsehair and silver onto her finger. "First time," she corrected. "The only time that counts." When spring finally came, melting the passes and opening the trails, they were ready. Eugene gifted them an old wagon. Rose pressed herbs and wisdom into Annabeth's hands. They left as they'd arrived, 2 people choosing each other against all odds. The valley was everything Jesse had promised, green and gold beneath the spring sun, with a stream running clear and cold through its heart. They built their cabin on a rise overlooking the meadows, close enough to town for trading, but far enough for privacy. No one questioned Thomas and Mary Kane, the quiet couple who raised good horses and kept to themselves. If sometimes the woman seemed too educated for a frontier wife, if the man moved like someone who'd lived by the gun, well, everyone in the West was running from something. Samuel Hargrove never learned the truth. He died 5 years later in a cantina brawl, his throat cut by a man he'd cheated at cards. His estate, what was left of it, went to distant cousins who'd never heard of Annabeth Whitlow. But in a valley in Colorado, a woman who'd once been property planted a garden and raised horses and bore children who would never know the weight of ownership. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, she and her husband would sit on their porch and watch the sunset over their chosen life. "Any regrets?" Jesse would ask. "Just one." Anna would answer, "What's that?" "That it took so long to find you." He'd kiss her then, this man who'd given her freedom with no expectation of return, who'd bled for her choices and chosen her in return. And in that kiss was every answer. You were worth the wait. You were worth the pain. You were worth everything. The cabin by the stream became their sanctuary. Through spring and into summer, Thomas and Mary Kane built a life from nothing but determination and love. The assumed names felt strange at first, but soon became as natural as breathing. Anna would catch Jesse's eye across their small table and smile, knowing they shared a secret the world would never learn. Their days found rhythm in simple tasks. Jesse worked with the wild horses that roamed the valley, gentling them with the same patient hands that had saved her. Anna tended the garden, coaxing vegetables from the mountain soil, learning which wild herbs could season their meals or soothe their hurts. In the evenings, they sat together, planning expansions to the cabin, discussing which horses to keep for breeding, dreaming of the future they were building board by board. The nearest town, Millbrook, lay a day's ride through the passes. They went monthly for supplies, playing their roles carefully. Thomas Kane was quiet, respectful, good with horses. Mary Kane was demure but competent, her Eastern education showing only in the precise way she kept their accounts. No one questioned their story of being childhood sweethearts from Kansas, finally able to marry after Thomas returned from the war. It was there, in Millbrook's general store, that Anna first noticed the change in her body. The familiar monthly discomfort hadn't come. Foods she normally enjoyed turned her stomach. When she nearly fainted examining fabric, the store owner's wife, Mrs. Patterson, took one knowing look and guided her to a chair. "First one's always the hardest," the older woman said kindly. "How far along?" I'm not certain. You'll want to see Doc Morrison when you're sure. Good man, discreet, delivered half the babies in this valley." Anna rode home in a daze, her secret burning bright as the summer sun. Jesse noticed her distraction immediately. "What's troubling you?" he asked that evening, catching her staring into the fire. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "Nothing's troubling me. Something's growing." The joy that transformed his face was worth every hardship they'd endured. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like spun glass, whispering promises and prayers into her hair. "A child," he breathed. "Our child. Born free," she whispered back, "never to be owned." The pregnancy progressed through autumn's glory. Jesse became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from lifting anything heavier than a spoon. Anna laughed at his efforts, but secretly cherished the care. Her body changed, expanded, and with it came a fierce protectiveness of her own. This child would know only love, only choice, only freedom. But freedom, she was learning, came with its own challenges. The first snows came early that year, catching them unprepared. Their wood supply, adequate for two, suddenly seemed dangerously low with a baby coming. Jesse worked dawn to dusk, cutting and splitting, racing against winter's grip. Anna helped as much as her expanding belly allowed, stacking wood and tending the horses. It was during a brief November thaw that the stranger arrived. Anna saw him first from the window, a lone rider picking his way up the valley trail. Something in his bearing, his watchful approach, set her nerves on edge. She reached for the rifle, checked it was loaded. "Jesse," she called quietly. He came immediately, read the tension in her posture. Together they watched the rider approach, middle-aged, well-dressed despite the trail dust, with the bearing of a man used to authority. "Stay inside," Jesse murmured, checking his pistol. "Like hell," despite the situation. His lips quirked. "Stubborn woman. You're stubborn woman. With excellent aim." The rider stopped a respectful distance from the cabin, hands visible. "Hello, the house? Looking for Thomas Kane." Jesse stepped onto the porch, Anna behind him in the doorway. "You found him." "Mr. Kane." The man dismounted slowly. "Name's Pinkerton. James Pinkerton. I'm a lawyer from Denver." Jesse's hand hovered near his gun. "We're not in need of legal services. I'm not here to sell anything." Pinkerton reached carefully into his coat, produced a letter. "I'm here about an inheritance. May I approach?" They let him come closer, though Jesse took the letter at arm's length. His frown deepened as he read, then passed it to Anna. "This says Thomas Kane of Colorado Territory has inherited property from one Eugene Walsh." She read aloud. "But Eugene died last month." Pinkerton supplied. "Caught in an early blizzard. His wife found him 3 days later. Before he died, he managed to update his will, left his cabin in trapping territories to," and I quote, "the only honest man I ever met, who deserved a better start than life gave him." Anna felt tears prick her eyes. Gruff Eugene, who'd saved their lives and asked so little in return. "There's a problem," Pinkerton continued carefully. "The will needs to be verified. The court requires proof that you are indeed the Thomas Kane who wintered with Eugene Walsh." Jesse's expression went carefully blank. "And what proof would satisfy the court?" "Witnesses who knew you then. Documentation, perhaps." Pinkerton's eyes were shrewd. "Someone who could verify your identity from before you met Eugene." The threat was subtle but clear, their carefully constructed new life balanced on a knife's edge. "What do you want?" Anna asked directly. Pinkerton smiled. "Nothing, Mrs. Kane. I'm simply a lawyer doing his job. However, I did do some research before coming here. Interesting reading in the old newspapers. Stories about a stable hand and a runaway wife, supposedly dead in a mountain shootout." Jesse stepped forward, but Anna caught his arm. "Also interesting," Pinkerton continued. is what I learned about Samuel Hargrove, his business practices, his treatment of employees, his mysterious first wife. A thoroughly unpleasant man, by all accounts, the sort of man who might drive a woman to desperate measures. He's dead, Jessie said flatly. Yes, I heard, unfortunate end in Mexico, which means, of course, that certain complications no longer exist. Pinkerton set his hat more firmly. I'll need you to sign some papers. Mr. Kane, and perhaps Mrs. Kane could provide her maiden name for the documentation, your real maiden name, that is, for accuracy. Anna met his gaze steadily. Whitlow, Anna Whitlow. Thank you. He made a note. The property isn't much, a cabin, some trapping rights, a few $100s Eugene had saved. But I thought you should have what he wanted you to have. Man spoke highly of you both, said you reminded him what love could survive. The business was concluded quickly. Pinkerton declined their offer of hospitality, eager to beat the threatening weather back to Denver. As he mounted his horse, he turned back. For what it's worth, I think you've built something good here. Don't let the past destroy it. He touched his hat. Mr. and Mrs. Kane. After he left, they stood together in the gathering dusk, processing what had happened. He knows, Jessie said quietly. He knows and chose not to use it. Anna leaned against him, felt his arms come around her and their child. Eugene's last gift, a lawyer with a conscience. That night, as snow began to fall in earnest, they talked about the future with new urgency. The inheritance would help, give them funds for the winter and beyond. But Pinkerton's visit had reminded them how fragile their peace was. Maybe we should move on, Jessie suggested. California, Oregon, somewhere no one's ever heard either of our names. No. Anna turned in his arms, fierce despite her ungainly shape. This is our home, our child's home. I'm done running. If someone else comes, then we'll face them. Together. As Thomas and Mary Kane, who have every right to live where they choose. She touched his face. Besides, do you really want our child born on the trail? He covered her hand with his, accepting defeat. Have I mentioned you're a stubborn woman? Once or twice. The baby came with a blizzard, 2 weeks before Christmas. Jessie had planned to fetch Doc Morrison from town, but the storm made travel impossible. It was just the two of them in their cabin, with Rose's teachings and Anna's own strength to see them through. This isn't how it's supposed to be, Jessie said, pale with worry as the pains grew stronger. Nothing about us has been how it's supposed to be. Anna gasped between contractions. Why should this be different? Hour by hour. The storm raged outside while Anna labored within. Jessie stayed with her throughout, letting her grip his hands until her nails drew blood, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue. You're the strongest person I know, he told her as dawn approached and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. You survived Samuel Hargrove. You survived gunfights and mountain flights. You can survive this. Together, she managed. We survived together or not at all. The baby came with the sunrise. As the storm finally broke, a daughter, small but fierce, with her mother's chin and her father's dark eyes. She announced her arrival with cries that rang off the cabin walls. She's perfect, Jessie breathed, cradling the tiny form while Anna recovered. What should we call her? Anna looked at their daughter. This child born free in a home built on choice and love. Hope, she said softly. Hope Elizabeth Kane. Hope. Jessie transferred the baby carefully to Anna's arms. Our hope for the future. They were a week into their isolated joy when they heard horses approaching. Jessie grabbed his rifle, but relaxed when he recognized the lead rider, Mrs. Patterson from town, accompanied by 2 other women, all bundled against the cold. Heard you might need some help up here. Mrs. Patterson called out, already dismounting. Storm kept everyone trapped, but we came as soon as the passes cleared. They swept in like a benevolent invasion, cooing over the baby, checking Anna's recovery. filling the cabin with bustle and gossip and the peculiar comfort of women who'd weathered their own birthings. "She's a beauty," Mrs. Patterson declared, expertly swaddling Hope. "Got her papa's eyes, I see. And her mama's spirit," one of the others added. "Look at that grip." They stayed for hours, helping with laundry, preparing food, sharing advice and stories. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Patterson took Anna aside. "I know you keep to yourselves mostly," she said quietly. "That's your right, but you're part of this community now. Your girl will grow up with our children, learn in our school, maybe marry one of our boys someday. Whatever brought you here, whatever you're guarding against, that's your business. But know you have friends now, people who'll stand with you if trouble comes." After they left, Anna found herself crying, not from sadness, but from a gratitude too large for words. They'd found more than land here. They'd found belonging. Winter held them close, days blending into nights of feeding and changing and marveling at their daughter's growth. Hope proved to be aptly named, a cheerful baby who seemed to find joy in everything from snowflakes at the window to her father's gentle singing. Jessie, who'd handled killers and wild horses with equal calm, was reduced to near panic by a diaper pin. Anna laughed until her sides hurt, watching him fumble with tiny clothes and blankets. "I've seen you gentle a horse that hadn't been touched by human hands," she teased. "But one small baby defeats you." "Horses are simpler," he protested. "They tell you what they need. So does she. Listen." And he did, learning Hope's different cries, the way she settled when he walked her a certain pattern, how she loved to grip his finger while falling asleep. Anna watched them together and felt her heart might burst from fullness. Spring came slowly, reluctantly, but with it came color and life. Anna emerged from the cabin like a butterfly from a chrysalis. Hope bound to her chest in a sling Rose had taught her to make. The garden needed planting, the horses needed tending, and life needed living. They worked together, Jessie breaking new ground for expanded crops while Anna planned and planted. Hope slept in a basket in the shade, watched over by their gentlest mare. It was during one such afternoon, the baby napping and Jessie working nearby, that Anna felt it, a profound sense of arrival. This was what she'd fled toward, not away from, this simple life of choice and work and love. Samuel had offered her a mansion and made it a prison. Jessie offered her a cabin and made it a kingdom. "You're smiling," Jessie observed, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "I'm happy," she said simply. He crossed to her, kissed her soundly despite the dirt and sweat. "Good. You deserve all the happiness this world can hold." "I have it," she assured him. "Right here." That evening, as they sat on the porch with Hope drowsing between them, Jessie produced something from his pocket, a letter, weathered and worn. "This came to town last week," he said quietly. "Didn't want to worry you until I knew what it meant." Anna's heart skipped, but she took the letter steadily. It was from Lily May, written in another's hand but signed with her mark. Samuel's former housemaid had learned of his death, had waited months to be sure, then written to the only address she had, General Delivery, Cimarron, New Mexico. From there it had been forwarded through Eugene's lawyer, finally reaching them. The message was simple. You are truly free now. Live well, be happy. You both deserve peace. Anna read it twice, then folded it carefully. She risked much to send this. She loved you, saw what many couldn't or wouldn't. I hope she's found her own freedom. They burned the letter together, watching the last link to their old lives turn to ash and drift away on the evening breeze. Hope stirred in Anna's arms, making small sounds of contentment. "No more looking back," Jessie said softly. "No more running." Anna agreed. They sat in peaceful silence as stars emerged overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their flight, their fear, their finding of each other. Now those stars looked down on something simpler and more precious, a family at peace, a love tested and proven, a future bright with possibility. Inside the cabin waited the simple supper Anna had prepared. Tomorrow would bring its own tasks, Horses to train, crops to tend, a baby to raise. But tonight, in this moment, they had everything. "I love you," Anna said into the quiet. "My husband, my choice, my home." Jesse's arm tightened around her. "And I love you, my wife, my salvation, my life." Hope yawned, tiny fist waving at the stars, already reaching for more than her parents had dared dream. Born free, raised in love, with the whole wide world before her. It was enough. It was everything. It was home. The news came on a scorching July afternoon, 5 years after Hope's birth. Anna was teaching her daughter letters at the kitchen table, while Jesse worked with a particularly stubborn Mustang in the corral. The rider who approached their homestead sat tall despite the heat, his dark suit incongruous against the summer dust. Anna recognized him immediately. James Pinkerton, the lawyer who'd brought Eugene's inheritance and kept their secrets. But the years had aged him, and his expression carried weight that made her stomach clench. "Mr. Pinkerton." She greeted him from the porch, Hope hiding behind her skirts. "This is unexpected." "Mrs. Kane, I apologize for arriving unannounced." He dismounted, removing his hat. "Is your husband available? I have news that concerns you both." Jesse appeared from the corral, sweat-stained and wary. He'd developed a sixth sense for trouble over the years, and Pinkerton's presence triggered it. They invited the lawyer inside, settling Hope with her slate and chalk in the corner. "I'll come straight to the point," Pinkerton began, accepting a glass of water gratefully. "Samuel Hargrove is alive." The words hit like physical blows. Anna's hand found Jesse's, gripping tight. "That's impossible," Jesse said flatly. "He died in Mexico. Bar fight. We heard—" "What you heard was what he wanted you to hear." Pinkerton pulled out a sheaf of papers. "The man who died was an associate of Hargrove's, similar in appearance. Hargrove used the death to disappear, to escape creditors and enemies. He's been living under an assumed name in San Francisco, rebuilding his fortune through unsavory means." "Why are you telling us this?" Anna's voice was steady, but Jesse could feel her trembling. "Because he knows you're alive, both of you." Pinkerton met their eyes gravely. "One of his men recognized you. Jesse, when you sold horses in Denver last spring. They've been investigating quietly, confirming identities. Hargrove is planning to reclaim what he considers his property. I'm not his property." Anna's voice could have cut glass. "I never was. The law be damned." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "We've built a life here. We have a child. We're legally married as Thomas and Mary Kane. Which is exactly why I'm here." Pinkerton leaned forward. "There are ways to protect yourselves, but they require truth and courage." Jesse studied the lawyer. "What are you proposing?" "Fight him legally, publicly. Expose what he is, what he did. The territory has newspapers now, judges who aren't in his pocket. Public opinion matters more than it did 6 years ago." Pinkerton glanced at Hope, who was drawing horses on her slate. "And there's the child to consider. Do you want to spend her childhood running, looking over your shoulders? What would this entail?" Anna returned to the table, the fighter Jesse had always known emerging from beneath the peaceful rancher's wife. "First, we establish your current marriage is valid, which it is. The ceremony was performed by a legitimate officiant, recorded properly. Second, we challenge any claim Hargrove might have on grounds of abandonment and cruelty. I've been collecting testimonies. Lily May managed to contact me, as have others who witnessed his treatment of you." "Lily May?" Anna's voice caught. "She's well?" "Living in San Francisco, actually, working for a family who treats her with respect. She's prepared to testify, despite the risks." "No, Jesse's voice was firm. "We won't put others in danger for our sake. The danger exists regardless," Pinkerton countered. "Hargrove has already hurt 2 of his former employees who refused to give information about Anna. He's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous." Hope's voice piped up from the corner. Mama? Why are you sad? Anna forced a smile, moving to kneel beside her daughter. Just grown-up talk, sweetheart. Show me your horses. As Hope chattered about her drawings, Anna met Jesse's eyes over their daughter's head. In that look was a conversation complete, about the life they'd built, the child they'd protect, the stand they'd have to take. What do you need from us? Jesse asked Pinkerton. Your true names, your true story, all of it, in legal depositions. We'll file in Denver, where Hargrove has less influence. Make it public enough that he can't simply make you disappear. The lawyer paused. It won't be easy. Your past, both of yours, will be exposed. The trial you endured, Jesse. The night you fled, Anna. All of it will become public record. But Hope will grow up knowing her parents fought for their freedom rather than living in its shadow. Pinkerton's voice gentled. I've seen what secrets do to families. Mrs. Kane, truth, however painful, is cleaner. They sent Pinkerton away with no firm answer, needing time to think. That night, after Hope was asleep, they sat by the fire and talked until dawn. We could run, Jesse offered, though his heart wasn't in it. California, Oregon, even Canada. Start over again. With what money? And for how long? Anna shook her head. We have savings, but not enough for another complete restart. And Hargrove found us once. He'll find us again. Then we fight. Then we fight. She agreed. But Jesse, if we do this... I know. He pulled her close. Everyone will know who we really are. The stable hand who killed a man. The mail-order bride who ran. Some will judge. Let them. Her voice turned fierce. I'd rather be judged for who I am than hide behind who I'm not. And our daughter... She paused, swallowing hard. Our daughter will know her parents chose courage over comfort. The next morning, they sent word to Pinkerton. They would fight. The preparations took months. Depositions were given, witnesses contacted, evidence gathered. Through it all, they maintained their daily routines. Jesse training horses, Anna tending garden and child, both pretending their world wasn't about to explode. Hope sensed the tension, becoming clingy and prone to nightmares. They told her what they could, that some people from long ago were causing trouble, but Mama and Papa would handle it. She accepted this with the trusting faith of childhood, more concerned with her new kitten than distant threats. The news broke in September, splashed across the Denver Post and quickly picked up by papers throughout the territory. Presumed dead couple emerges to fight bigamy claim. The story had everything: violence, escape, assumed identities, a cruel husband thought dead. Within days, reporters were making the journey to their valley. Jesse met them at the property line with a rifle and cold courtesy. No interviews, no photographs, no trespassing. But the story had already taken on a life of its own. Letters poured in, some supportive, some condemning, some asking for money or offering marriage proposals to the brave lady rancher. Then Hargrove made his move. He arrived in Denver with fanfare, playing the wronged husband to perfection. He gave interviews portraying himself as a heartbroken man whose young wife had been seduced by a criminal. He hired the best lawyers, demanded his stolen property be returned. She is my legal wife, he told reporters. Whatever false marriage she's contracted is invalid. I forgive her youthful indiscretion, and I'm prepared to take her back. The words, reported in every paper, made Anna physically ill. Jesse found her retching behind the barn, Hope patting her back with concerned little hands. Mama sick? Just angry. Baby. Anna wiped her mouth, managed a wan smile. Sometimes anger makes our bodies upset. Then don't be angry, Hope said simply. If only it were that easy. The trial was set for October. They would have to travel to Denver, leave their sanctuary for the harsh light of public judgment. Mrs. Patterson and the other women from town rallied around them, offering to watch the ranch, care for the animals. The community that had accepted them as the Kanes stood by them as their truth emerged. Don't matter what names you used. Mrs. Patterson said firmly, we know who you are. Good people who help their neighbors and raise their child, right? That's what counts. The night before they left for Denver, Anna couldn't sleep. She walked their land in the moonlight, memorizing every fence post, every tree, every view. Jesse found her by the stream where they'd built Hope's swing. "We could still run," he offered one last time. "No." She turned into his arms. "This is our stand. Here, now, for her." She nodded toward the house where Hope slept. "And for every woman trapped in a marriage that's killing her soul. If my story helps even one, then it's worth it." He finished her thought, as he so often did. "My brave Anna." "Annabeth," she corrected softly. "In Denver. I'll be Annabeth again. It's time to reclaim all of myself." The trial was a sensation, the courtroom packed daily with spectators, journalists, curiosity seekers. Annabeth sat straight-backed beside Jesse, wearing the simple gray dress she'd sewn herself. Hargrove, across the aisle, had gained weight and lost hair, but his pale eyes remained snake-cold when they found hers. The first days were Hargrove's show. His lawyers painted a picture of a devoted husband betrayed, a generous man whose kindness was repaid with deception. They produced the marriage certificate, letters from concerned citizens about Jesse's notorious past. Then Pinkerton took the floor, one by one. Witnesses testified. Lily May, granted special permission to testify in writing due to her disability, described the bruises she'd tended, the fear that permeated the Hargrove house. Former servants spoke of cruelty, of control, of the first Mrs. Hargrove's suspicious death. The doctor who'd examined Anna after her flight confirmed evidence of repeated violence. Jesse testified about finding her at the station, about the night in the storm, about helping her escape. His voice never wavered, even when Hargrove's lawyer tried to twist his actions into those of a predator. "I helped a woman in danger," he stated simply. "If that makes me a criminal, then I'm guilty, but I'd do it again." Finally, Annabeth took the stand. She spoke for hours, voice clear and steady. She told of the letters that promised one life and delivered another, of isolation and control masquerading as care, of bruises hidden beneath fine dresses, of letters censored and freedom stripped away. "He never saw me as a person," she said, meeting Hargrove's furious gaze. "Only as property, something to own, to control, to break. But I refused to break. I chose to run. I chose to live, and I chose to love a man who saw me as an equal." "You took vows," Hargrove's lawyer pressed. "Sacred vows before God." "I took vows based on lies, to a man who existed only in letters, the real Samuel Hargrove." She gestured toward him. "That man I never married. That man I fled to save my life." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Denver held its breath. Newspapers running special editions, crowds gathering outside the courthouse. When the verdict came, Annabeth gripped Jesse's hand so tight her nails left marks. The foreman stood, paper trembling in his hands. "In the matter of Hargrove versus Kane, we find the original marriage invalid due to fraud and cruelty. We recognize the marriage of Jesse and Annabeth Kane as legal and binding." The courtroom erupted. Hargrove shot to his feet, screaming obscenities until bailiffs restrained him. Annabeth turned into Jesse's arms, both of them shaking with relief. It was over. They were free, truly, legally, finally free. But Hargrove wasn't finished. That night, as they celebrated quietly in their hotel room, Hope asleep between them, a shot shattered the window. Jesse threw himself over his family as glass rained down, heard shouts and running feet in the corridor. They found Hargrove in the alley below, pistol in hand, ranting about stolen property and justice. The police arrested him, but the damage was done. Hope woke screaming, terrified by the noise and blood from where glass had cut Jesse's back. "It's all right, sweetheart," Annabeth soothed, even as she pressed cloth to Jesse's wounds. "Just a bad man making noise. He can't hurt us." But she wondered if that were true. Would they spend their lives looking over their shoulders? Would Hope grow up afraid? The answer came from an unexpected source: the attempted shooting. Following so close on the trial, turned public opinion decisively. Newspapers that had been neutral now condemned Hargrove. Women's groups rallied, calling for stronger protections for abused wives. The judge, furious at the attack on his courthouse's dignity, threw every possible charge at Hargrove. Samuel Hargrove was sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder, assault, and contempt of court. As they led him away, he turned one last time to Annabeth. "You're still mine," he hissed. "You'll always be mine." "No," she said clearly, strongly. "I belong to no one but myself, and I choose to share my life with a man who understands that." They returned home to find their valley unchanged, their neighbors welcoming, their life waiting. Hope ran through the rooms, delighted to be home, the terror of Denver already fading into childhood's blessed forgetfulness. That night, as they lay in their own bed, Jessie traced the fading scars on Annabeth's skin, old marks from Hargrove's fists, newer ones from their flight through the mountains. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "The trial, the exposure. Everyone knows our story now." "Good," she said firmly. "Let them know. Let every woman trapped in a cruel marriage know that escape is possible. Let every man who thinks he owns his wife know that property can choose to walk away. My warrior," he murmured, kissing her softly. "Your equal," she corrected, returning the kiss with interest. Outside, the stream sang its eternal song. The horses dozed in the corral. Hope slept safe in her bed, dreaming of kittens and sunshine. And in the darkness, two people who had chosen each other against all odds held tight and planned their future. Not as Jessie Kane and Annabeth Hargrove, not as Thomas and Mary Kane, simply as themselves, Jessie and Annabeth Kane. Horse ranchers, parents, survivors, and living proof that love could conquer law, that choice could defeat ownership, that freedom was worth any price. The past was done. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility. And in this moment, in this bed, in this home they'd built with their own hands, they were exactly where they belonged. Together, equal, free. 10 years passed like water through their fingers, each season adding layers to their life like rings in a tree. The ranch prospered, expanding from a modest homestead to one of the most respected horse operations in Colorado Territory. Jessie's reputation for gentling difficult horses drew buyers from as far as California, while Annabeth's skill with accounts and negotiations made her an unusual but respected figure in the male world of livestock trading. Hope grew tall and strong, with her mother's quick mind and her father's way with animals. At 15, she could ride anything with 4 legs and had opinions about everything from women's suffrage to the proper way to train a cutting horse. She knew her parents' story, the real one, and wore it like armor against a world that sometimes whispered about the scandal of her birth. It was a crisp October morning when the letter arrived that would close the final chapter of their past. Annabeth was teaching the local school, something she'd taken on when the previous teacher married and moved away. Jessie was working with a promising young stallion. Hope was in Denver, attending the academy for young ladies that she tolerated only because it also offered courses in veterinary science. The post rider handed Jessie the thick envelope with unusual ceremony. "From the territorial prison," he said quietly. "Marked urgent." Jessie's hand stilled. He knew without opening it what it would contain. Samuel Hargrove's sentence was complete. After 10 years, time off for what prison officials called good behavior, he was being released. He found Annabeth in the schoolhouse after dismissing her students early. She took one look at his face and knew. When? Next month. He handed her the official notice. The warden felt we should be informed, given the history. She read it carefully, her face composed as granite. "He's prohibited from coming within 100 miles of us. That's something. Paper doesn't stop bullets." "No." She set the notice aside, met his worried gaze. "But we're not the same people we were 10 years ago. We're established now, protected by community, by law, by truth. He has nothing left but hate, and hate alone can't sustain a man forever." Jessie pulled her close, breathed in the scent of chalk dust and lavender soap. "I can't lose you, either of you." "You won't." Her voice was steel-wrapped in silk. We've come too far to let him destroy us now. They prepared quietly. Jesse increased his target practice, teaching Annabeth new techniques with both rifle and pistol. They hired 2 ranch hands, young men looking for work but also capable of defending the property. They spoke with the sheriff, now a friend who'd eaten at their table countless times, who promised extra patrols, but weeks passed, then months, with no sign of Hargrove. Reports trickled in. He'd been seen in Denver, then Cheyenne, then nothing. It was almost worse than a direct confrontation. This waiting, this wondering. Spring arrived with its usual demands. Foaling season kept them busy dawn to dusk, and Hope returned from Denver full of plans to start a horse breeding program focused on temperament rather than just conformation. "We could revolutionize the industry," she declared over dinner, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Breed for intelligence, for partnership, not just speed or looks." "Where did this child come from?" Jesse asked with fond exasperation. "When I was 15, all I thought about was avoiding work." "You were never 15, Annabeth teased. "You were born responsible." It was during this ordinary evening, this casual family dinner, that they heard the horses screaming. Jesse was moving before the sound fully registered, rifle in hand. Annabeth grabbed the shotgun from above the door. Hope, trained since childhood, took position at the window with her own weapon. The barn was ablaze. Flames licked at the sky, turning twilight into false dawn. The horses, their precious horses, were trapped inside, their panicked cries piercing the night. "Stay here," Jesse ordered, already running. But Annabeth was right behind him, and Hope, stubborn as both parents, followed. They worked frantically, Jesse kicking down stall doors, Annabeth and Hope leading terrified animals to safety. The smoke was thick, choking, but they didn't stop until every horse was out. It was only then, standing in the yard watching their barn collapse into flames, that they saw him. Samuel Hargrove stood at the edge of the firelight, no longer the powerful man of memory. Prison had hollowed him out, left him gaunt and gray, but his pale eyes still burned with that familiar madness. 10 years, he said conversationally, as if continuing some interrupted discussion. 10 years in a cage, thinking of this moment. Jesse stepped forward, shielding his family. "It's over. Hargrove, you've done your damage. Leave now and we won't press charges." Hargrove laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Press charges? For what? Accidentally dropping a lantern near a barn. Tragic accident. These things happen." "You're in violation of the court order," Annabeth said, her voice steady despite the rage Jesse could feel vibrating through her. "You're not supposed to be within 100 miles. Court orders," Hargrove spat. "Legal marriages. Proper behavior. You lecture me about rules. Whore, you who broke every sacred vow, who turned my own servants against me, who destroyed my reputation." "You destroyed yourself," Hope said suddenly, stepping out from behind her parents. At 15, she was tall as her mother, with a direct gaze that had never learned to flinch. "I've heard the stories, not just from my parents, but from everyone who knew you. You were a monster long before my mother ran." Hargrove's attention fixed on Hope with an intensity that made Jesse's finger tighten on the trigger. "The bastard speaks." "I'm no bastard," Hope said clearly. "I'm the daughter of Jesse and Annabeth Kane, legally married, legally recognized. You're nothing to us but a bad memory and a burnt barn." "Hope, get back," Annabeth warned, but their daughter stood firm. "No, Mama, I'm tired of this shadow hanging over our lives. He's just a bitter old man who can't accept that he lost." She addressed Hargrove directly. "You want to hurt us? You already have. We'll rebuild the barn, replace what was lost. That's what we do. We build. All you do is destroy. And that's why you'll always be alone." Hargrove's face contorted with rage. His hand moved toward his coat, but Jesse was already raising his rifle. "Don't," Jesse warned. "I've killed one man in my life, and it haunts me still. But I'll kill you without a second's regret if you threaten my family." "Your family?" Hargrove's laugh was wild now. "Built on lies, on theft, on—" the shot came from behind them. Sheriff Watson stepped out of the shadows, smoking rifle in hand. Hargrove crumpled, clutching his shoulder. "That's enough," the sheriff said calmly. "Samuel Hargrove, you're under arrest for arson, violation of a court order, and attempted assault, and this time, you won't be getting out early for good behavior." As deputies materialized to take Hargrove away, he turned one last time, but it wasn't hate in his eyes anymore. It was bewilderment, as if he couldn't understand how he'd ended up here, defeated by the very people he'd considered beneath him. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he mumbled as they dragged him away. "No," Annabeth said quietly. "It wasn't, but you chose this path with every blow, every cruel word, every attempt to own instead of love. We just chose a different way." The barn burned through the night, neighbors arriving to help control the flames, to save what could be saved. By dawn, only smoking ruins remained of what had been a beautiful structure. But the horses were safe, the house untouched, and the family unharmed. They stood together in the early light, Jesse, Annabeth, and Hope, surveying the damage. "We'll rebuild," Jesse said simply. "Better than before," Hope added. "Together," Annabeth finished, and they did. The new barn rose from the ashes of the old, built with help from neighbors who came without being asked. The story of the confrontation spread, cementing the Canes' place in local legend. Samuel Hargrove was tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison. He died there 3 years later, unmourned and forgotten except as a cautionary tale. Hope went on to become one of the territory's first female veterinarians, revolutionizing horse breeding just as she'd promised. She married a quiet man who supported her ambitions, raising their children to understand that partnership meant equality, that love meant freedom. Jesse's hair turned silver, but his hands remained gentle and sure with the horses. He became a sort of elder statesman among horsemen, sought out for his wisdom and his methods. He never fully lost the watchfulness that came from violence survived, but he found peace in the life they'd built. Annabeth wrote their story down, every word of it, publishing it as a memoir that became a rallying cry for women trapped in abusive marriages. Letters poured in from across the country, women who'd found courage in her courage, who'd chosen flight over subjugation. She answered everyone. On their 40th wedding anniversary, counting from that wind-swept ceremony in Eugene Walsh's cabin, they sat on the same porch where they'd once kept watch for threats. Now they watched their grandchildren play in the yard, chasing chickens and laughing. "Any regrets?" Jesse asked, an echo of a question posed so many times over the years. "Just one," Annabeth answered, as she always did. "What's that?" But this time, her answer was different. "I regret that young girl who stepped off that train didn't know she was already free, that she had to learn it through pain." "Maybe that's the only way any of us learn," Jesse said, taking her hand. "Through choosing, through fighting, through surviving. Maybe." She squeezed his fingers, still calloused, still strong. "But look what we built from those choices." The valley spread before them, golden in the afternoon light. Their land, their horses, their family. A life constructed choice by choice, season by season, on the foundation of mutual respect and chosen love. "You aren't the mail-order bride who never reached her intended groom," Jesse said softly. "You're Annabeth Kane, who chose her own path. And you aren't just the stableman who helped me escape. You're the man who gave me room to be myself, who stood beside me, never in front of me." "Partners," he said. "Always." She agreed. A child's voice called from the yard, their youngest granddaughter, Hope's daughter, named Anna for the grandmother who'd taught her that freedom was worth any price. "Grandma, Grandpa, watch me ride." They rose together, hands still linked, to watch another generation grow strong and free. The burnt barn had been replaced by better. The old pain had been transformed into purpose. And in this valley, beside this stream, two people who'd risked everything for choice and dignity grew old together, surrounded by the love they'd dared to claim. It was more than enough. It was everything. It was the life they'd chosen, built one free breath at a time. Thank you for joining us on this journey through The Mail-Order Bride Never Reached Her Groom Because the Stableman Took Her First Breath. I hope Annabeth and Jesse's story of courage, choice, and redemption touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. Please share in the comments where you're listening from. I love connecting with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more tales of love and adventure from America's frontier. What did you think of Annabeth's journey? Would you have made the same choices? Share your thoughts below. And let's discuss this powerful story of freedom and love against all odds.